Tonight, Thistletown shut down.
Tonight, go ahead, call them dummies. Cash. Aye, aye, Captain.
New 6 run the senior, Director.
Good evening. Trouble tonight over plans to close one of only 2 regional centers to care for severely disturbed children. Parents vowed tonight to fight to make sure Thistletown does not shut down.
You made a choice for the children, for the communities. Did you go out into the community and ask if they want our children? Do you know what it's like to walk down the hallway of a school and be told they don't want your child?
More than 200 parents put Minister of Social Services Tony Salipo on the hot seat after the Ray government announced it would phase out most of the center's programs over the next year and a half and reinvest $9 million into community-based programs in Peel and York regions.
No child will be moved from a program here at Thistletown until and unless there is a program established in the community.
No doubt the parents here believe their children should be cared for in their own communities. And if the government follows through on its promise, more children than the 400 here at Thistletown could be served. Problem is, these people just don't believe the politicians.
And we just don't trust the fact that they can rip apart these programs that work for our kids and reinvent programs that might work. Our kids aren't guinea pigs, and it's our lives, it's their lives, and we can't take a chance with that.
And have you ever thought, when you decided this policy, to consult psychiatrists, to consult workers, to consult families?
It's not likely that this protest will make a difference to the minister tonight, but these parents are determined. They plan to take their next protest to Queen's Park. In Thistletown, I'm Natalie Peugeot for City Pulse Tonight.
Still a medical challenge tonight for the parents of Hira and Nita Jamal.
Minister of Social Services Tony Salipo faced a roomful of angry parents, and they had one thing on their mind. They're planning to keep their facility open.
Did you have your supper yet? You did.
Jackie and Don McBurney can't imagine life without Thistletown.
Words kind of fail me at this moment. I guess we're both shaken, shattered.
Their 24-year-old son, John, has received treatment here for most of his life. He is autistic and prone to violent outbursts.
He'd be very aggressive at times, and it was always a difficult time.
For the past 2 years, John has lived at the center, and his parents say he's never been happier. The government has promised to provide alternative facilities.
The point is taking the money that's being spent here and making sure that exactly the kinds of supports that children with autism and all of the other children are getting now are going to be able to be received by them closer to where they live.
But the McBurneys and many of the other parents in this room say they are tired of trying to find a place where their children will have a good life.
Did you go out into the community and ask if they want our children? Do you know what it's like to walk down the hallway of a school and be told they don't want your child? So you fight for them to be somewhere in their simple way.
Despite government promises to provide alternative care facilities with the same level of services, the parents just don't believe that that is what's going to happen.
Well, why is that, Diane? If the government has offered alternatives, why are the parents still so upset?
One of the reasons they're upset is because they can't understand why a government would fix something that they say isn't broken.
All right, Diane, thank you.
Thank you.
A suspect led 3 different police forces on an 80-kilometer
And gets 3 life sentences. Night Beat is next.
Night Beat News with Christine Bentley and Tom Gibney.
Good evening. An emotionally charged meeting tonight over the closure of a complex for special needs children.
Parents pleaded with Social Services Minister Tony Salipo not to close the Thistletown Center. CFTO's Pat Foran reports.
Parents cheered, jeered, and begged Social Services Minister Tony Salipo to reverse his decision to close the Thistletown Regional Center. It's a facility for high-risk, high-needs children.
Your ministry is human as anyone else, and they are capable of making mistakes. I am sorry, Mr. Salipo, you have made a big one here. Yeah. And all we want...
Don't tell us you understand, because you don't. I'm sorry.
The center provides care for 400 children who are autistic, violent, or who need other special help. Parents say Thistletown offers educational programs that work and relief for families who need it. The government announced last week it will close the center over the next 18 months and introduce community-based services. Salipo tried to assure parents they will still get excellent care for their children.
And the point is taking the money that's being spent here and making sure that exactly the kinds of supports that children with autism and all of the other children are getting now are going to be able to be received by them closer to where they live.
But parents say the system isn't broke, so why fix it? Many worry scattered community programs won't offer the same caliber of service. The parents with children that attend this center say they are at their wits' end, and they say the government must reverse its decision so they can save Thistletown. Pat Foran, CFTO News.
Provincial plans to eliminate programs at the Thistletown Center sparked a fiery protest by parents of special needs kids last night. They grilled Social Services Minister Tony Salipo.
You made a choice for children, for the communities. Did you go out into the community and ask if they want our children? Do you know what it's like to walk down the hallway of a school and be told they don't want your child?
Have you ever thought, when you decided this policy, to consult psychiatrists, to consult workers, to consult families?
No child will be moved from a program here at Thistletown until and unless there is a program established in the community.
We just don't trust the fact that they can rip apart these programs that work for our kids and reinvent programs that might work. Our kids aren't guinea pigs, and it's our lives, it's their lives, and we can't take a chance with that.
Parents won't quit their fight to keep Thistletown alive. Their next protest, it's planned for Queen's Park.
Famous person.
If it ain't broke, why fix it? That's what outraged parents of developmentally handicapped children say about the closure of the Thistletown Regional Center. CFTO's Pauline Chan reports.
They look alike, but 5-year-old Nathan Bradley in the blue sweatshirt is different from his 7-year-old brother Kyle. Nathan has autism. He attends a segregated class at a public school, and when his parents Sandra and Richard just can't cope with his hyperactive and potentially dangerous behavior, he goes to Etobicoke's Thistletown Regional Center for a day or more.
It was just a fluke that I came across it, but it's been a total godsend that they've been there for us.
But the province has just announced 3 programs at the Thistletown Regional Center will be shut down over the next 18 months. The $12.2 million will be redistributed to Peel, York Region, and Metro for community-based services for developmentally challenged children.
It will be operated by the community and will be closer to where the children actually live and more accessible to them.
Staff around here right now are absolutely devastated. I think their first concern has been for the children that the center services and where are they now going to get these services.
But the union for the 340 workers affected say the province is doing it all wrong.
The nature of a regional center means that we get all the clients that community agents can't serve. We get the absolute most difficult clients.
We've been through the local programs. Our son is so bad off, is so unreachable, is so unhelpable that they couldn't help us.
Some parents are banding together to try and reverse the province's decision, but Sandra Bradley fears without Thistletown Support Network, she may not be able to keep Nathan at home at all and may have to place him in a group home. Pauline Chan, CFTO News.
A strike at the parents of developmentally handicapped children are outraged over the closure of the Thistletown Regional Center. The province has just announced 3 programs at the Thistletown Regional Center will be shut down over the next 18 months. The $12.2 million will be redistributed to Peel, York Region, and Metro for community-based services for developmentally challenged children. A group of parents is banding together to try to reverse the province's decision. Some fear that without Thistletown Support Network, they may not be able to have their children at home and may have to place them in a group home.
In just a few minutes' time, but first, the province's plans to shut a center for disabled children frustrates and angers parents. Stay with us. Mentally disabled children in the Toronto area are worried and angry that the province is shutting down a regional treatment center. Our Queen's Park correspondent Robin Smythe has the story.
The Thistletown Center is a victim of the community-based philosophy.
that says help is best provided close to home. That means this regional center treating 400 developmentally disabled children will close its doors in July 1996.
It's terrible to pull children from Peel to a program that exists in Rexdale, and then they have to go back and be part of that community.
So the money saved, more than $12 million, will be given instead to several local programs, mostly in underfunded Peel and York regions. The government insists the move will shrink a long waiting list. Good boy. But the plan has come as a shock to 5-year-old Nathan Bradley's family.
It means that all hope my husband and I had for our son is lost.
Nathan is autistic. Teachers at Thistletown toilet trained him, taught him to write his name, and gave his parents some much-needed time off.
What am I going to do when he gets up in a year and a half and starts asking for teachers and I have to say, sorry, they're gone? Is he going to fall to pieces on us? Is he going to regress and go back to what it used to be?
But local groups that already provide child services urge parents not to worry. They welcome the chance to develop more programs. And the minister responsible promises no children will be removed from Thistletown until they have someplace else to go.
The parents who are caring for disabled children deserve a much clearer explanation from the minister than that as to how he's going to provide the support they need.
The Bradleys plan to fight what the minister says is a final decision. Robin Smythe, Global News, Queen's Park.
Parents of development.
This is not connected to Thistletown. I need to be clear about that. This funding is not tied into the decision we made around Thistletown. That was while there are ties in terms of the direction that we are moving in terms of the dollars, they're two very different initiatives, two very different processes. The fund, the decision that we announced around Thistletown, we will continue to move on, but we've also said very clearly to the parents of Thistletown that no child will be moved out of the Thistletown programs until there is a program that we believe is adequate and that they, as parents, believe is satisfactory to them. So that's a direction that we are going to be moving in. Again, we want to engage very much the parents at Thistletown to work with us and with agencies to develop the new programs there that will replace the programs. We'll also be very clear that we're not, while we set the 18-month timeline as we think a reasonable timeline for that process to unfold, that if that has to be adjusted, we'll adjust that, but there's a separate issue that we want to do. It's connected with the tragedy.
On tonight's program, province announces closure of Thistletown Regional Centre and residents voice concerns about airport management. Good evening and welcome to another week's edition of Cable 10 News Community Magazine. I'm Carla Charest with Lindy Howlings. Recently, the Provincial Ministry of Community and Social Services announced that it was closing Thistletown Regional Centre in North Etobicoke. This centre provides treatment for children and adolescents with emotional, behavioral, developmental, and learning problems. The province wants to move the youngsters into community-based treatment centres. But not everyone is convinced that they'll receive the same level of service. Ingrid Reed has that story.
Almost 2 weeks ago, the staff of Thistletown Regional Centre received news from the NDP government which slated them for closure. The parents, however, received the news from the employees just hours before it hit the media.
Mr. Salipo and the ministry have been trying to respond to requests by various agencies and community groups around the province to provide funding so that services can take place in the communities rather than taking children or indeed some adults out of the communities.
Tony Salipo has said that the $12 million that is given to Thistletown annually will now be given to the individual cities where these kids are from, so that they can graduate back into the community. According to Michael Storr, the parents have tried to let Salipo know how they feel.
I think the parents told him very loudly that this was not possible, I think he continued to read off the party line that said, well, we think we can somehow do this, but I think perhaps he doesn't understand how unrealistic that is in terms of the kind of problems that these kids have. And the parents do understand, and unfortunately at the end of it, he did not seem to be that convinced. He seemed to think that somehow these services can be put in the community, but how you can take one operation and duplicate it in 5 different communities for less money, I don't think it takes a genius to figure out that that's not very likely possible.
Thistletown services over 400 clients who suffer from extreme emotional and behavioral problems. John Katsikaris, also known as JK, is one of the residents who benefits from the services here.
Your daughter's name is Sandra.
Diane Gaggio's daughter is also serviced at Thistletown.
She actually is in a program under the name Thistletown, and it's known as Triad. So she is involved in a classroom environment with Triad, as well as there are home services that are available, as well as parent relief, which is essentially it provides us an opportunity to place her with some people that are qualified to look after her, and then it lets me sort of continue my life with my other daughter in that.
Not only are parents and staff worried about the closure, but according to Gaggio, so are educators in the different communities.
We've been contacted, for example, by the school boards in those communities. So, for example, where I've had a battle with the school system in York Region for the last 6 years, because that school system could not provide adequate services or adequate caregiving for my daughter. What's happening is that when she is brought back into that community, there's nothing different because they're not benefiting from the funding. They're not the benefactors of the money that's going into those areas. So the school boards themselves and the specialists that work within the school boards are actually very concerned, and they're meeting independently to sort of determine what they can do when these children come into their communities again.
The results of the parents' and employees' efforts will not be seen for at least another 18 months, because that's when Thistletown is slated for closure. For Community Magazine, I'm Ingrid Reed.
Community Magazine went looking for reaction to the closing of Thistletown.
Well, we're very surprised to learn of that closing, and it's unfortunate that the province didn't think to tell us in advance, because we certainly have had many phone calls about the matter, and it's not, well, it's just not proper that the people would be phoning up the mayor of the municipality where the facility is located, and the mayor doesn't know anything about the closing. And aside from that, I just think it's you know, we don't have all that many provincial services here in Etobicoke, and we hate to lose one. And this particular service, I know, is a service that's aimed at certain needy groups, and it's a shame that it's not going to be available here in Etobicoke.
Well, my concern is that we might be having the same situation that we had in 1979 when EMSA was founded as a result of the closing of the Lakeshore Hospital, psychiatric hospital, when the services that were needed to replace that institution and the services that offered were not there in the community. So you have people leaving the institution with no promise of supportive services in the community. And our view is that before you close institutions, you have those services in place that people can move their children into. And with Thistletown, they're serving such a high-need population that it needs a tremendous amount of planning and initiative and money, for that matter, to develop the same kinds of services in more local and community-based settings. So I'm very concerned that there will be a real gap between removing people from institutions and providing the same level of service in community settings.
At the same time the province is closing regional treatment centers in favor of community-based centers, they have established a district mental health services agency to take the place of community-based service agencies. One of the local agencies affected is EMSA, which is closing its doors on March 31st. Last week, EMSA invited other organizations to help themselves to their office equipment and furniture. Maninda Shana reports.
This is going to be like a lottery.
Service agencies from around the area came to pick the place clean. After 13 years, the Etobicoke Mental Health Services Agency, or EMSA, is shutting its doors. Against petitions and letters of support, the Ministry of Health decided to restructure mental health services in Metro Toronto. With the new centralization of healthcare, the ministry argued there was no alternative but to close down several localized mental health agencies.
There are going to be a few business details and accounting for the budget and doing a wrap-up audit that will have to be done after March 31st. But in effect, the organization will no longer operate as of March 31st.
There was talk of going it alone, but the agency decided to scrap the idea.
I think that when the membership looked at all of the different options and some of the legal issues involved with closing down the organization and or continuing the organization with some other mandate, they felt that the safest way in terms of the legalities and all the legal arrangements that are involved, it would be better to close the organization down completely.
Some board members, like Elizabeth Fowler, are hoping to form a problem-solving group to fill in and address some of the gaps the new system will leave in the area.
There's so many issues with the survivors, with the family, with the professionals. Mental health affects so many Canadians that it's really for everybody's betterment to be more aware.
After EMSA closes its doors, a transition committee will be formed. Its job will be to oversee the changes that need to be made at both the local and metro levels. The District Health Council, which oversees the reform, will concentrate on mental health services rather than additional services EMSA provided. EMSA hopes its 5 employees will be reshuffled into the new system. They'll be replaced by a single local health planner. Maninder Chana for Community Magazine.
The Etobicoke Health Department is offering a
Street-side anger in Ontario politics tonight over the closing of Thistletown Regional Centre for Disabled Children. Dozens of protesters, including Thistletown staff members and parents with kids at the centre, intercepting Community and Social Services Minister Tony Salipo on his way to an NDP fundraiser at the Montecasino Place Banquet Hall.
The way we can resolve this is to sit down calmly.
But you won't get reappointed.
Yes, I will. We will talk with you. We just heard that the parents are electing or have elected representatives. I will sit down. I will sit down with the representatives of the parents. I will sit down with the representatives of the workers.
Sit down with my son and my daughter and explain to them why
nothing is going to happen to your son and your daughter until we know that there is something else in place for them.
As Salipo makes his way to the dinner, more promises to meet with those affected by Thistletown's closure.
Etobicoke held a protest tonight. The Thistletown Centre offers a variety of treatments and services to young people. The province announced last month it was closing the centre down. The protesters got together tonight outside a banquet hall where a fundraiser for Tony Salipo was being held. He's the Minister of Community and Social Services. The people who work at the centre say it's not the money that brought them out.
We're concerned about the services that the kids we serve and the families we serve, and we're out here with the parents today because the parents know that they can't find similar services in the community.
The centre is slated to close in 1996. A court has increased
at home over the closure of Thistletown, a group home for troubled kids. It won't happen for another 18 months, but videographer Todd Southgate tells us things are already heating up.
Your other local-based agencies say, we can't handle your child, we'll refer to you to Thistletown. This is the last place where you can hopefully find something for your child, and without it there's going to be a lot more kids that fall through the cracks and have nothing.
Okay, Nathan. This yellow ribbon on the sign here is a symbol of protest. Fact, families and friends against the closing of Thistletown are angry that the province has decided to close down a facility that meets the needs of some 400 children and adolescents who have severe behavioral disabilities and redirect that funding into community-based programs in Peel and York regions.
Main reason why they're here is because they've already failed in community-based programs.
Several of the clients are already products of group homes, residential treatment centers, and the reason why they're here is because they're so hard to serve. They can't go in the community. They're on either medication to control their anger. They need services 24 hours a day.
Just to stop her from going down.
Stop.
Say hi.
Hi.
If she's upset or angry, not getting her way about something that goes way beyond sort of a temper tantrum, she has enough strength in her elbows and in the heels of her feet to be able to put holes in the door. Redistributing the funds back to the communities, they're not going to have enough funds to be able to offer all of the services that are currently being offered by Thistletown. It really is a model treatment facility. There's nothing with substance to replace what they want to close down. Absolutely nothing.
I wasn't able to get a comment from Tony Salipo, the Minister of Community and Social Services today, but Ed Phillip, the MPP whose riding includes Thistletown, is in for an earful when concerned family members protest at a fundraiser for him this evening. Watch for that on City Pulse tonight.
Tonight, parents protest.
Tonight, Italian art film. Tonight, Blues Busters.
Good evening. Tonight, the battle to save Thistletown Treatment Center heats up as angry parents fight to keep the doors open. Banquet hall in Etobicoke to get some answers. Their MPP, Ed Phillip, is holding a fundraising dinner in here tonight, and they want to know once and for all what he's going to do about Thistletown. This time, he gave them something they hadn't had before, a ray of hope that perhaps the Ontario government will reconsider shutting down the facility.
I've presented your views to Tony Salipo, and certainly Tony will be meeting with you next week, and so the matter is under review, so we'll be looking at it.
Thistletown is slated to close in July of '96. Right now, it treats about 400 children with severe behavioral and developmental problems. Parents say community-based care is not appropriate for these kids.
She has enough strength in her elbows and in the heels of her feet to be able to put holes in the door.
11-year-old Megan is a Thistletown success story.
She'd get violent in school and everything, and now the regular school systems would suspend her and send her home for me to take care of her.
We never used to get along, and we'd always get into fights, and now we're like best friends.
A lot of times this is the last hope for these kids, and so that's why they're with us, because we can offer the program that they need.
Thistletown also provides services for teenage sex offenders, victims of sexual abuse, and young people who pose a threat to themselves and the whole community.
Central Canadian School are generating a lot of fear and anger. The students have behavioral problems. Parents are prepared to sue if the school closes. That story coming up. Serious emotional and behavioral problems be treated in an institutional setting, or should they be integrated into the community at large? That question is at the root of an angry fight in Ontario over a centre called Thistletown. The government wants to close it down, and a group of parents is threatening legal action to keep it open. CTV's Anton Kashani reports.
Nathan Bradley is 5 years old. He's autistic, a disability that makes him uncommunicative, sometimes violent. But his mom says Nathan's been a lot better since he began going to an institution called Thistletown. But the Ontario government says that centre will close.
All they continue to say is, don't worry, trust us. We know what we're doing. This is not their son, it's mine.
I don't even know if he'll ever be able to find an educational program as appropriate as what he's getting now.
This is Thistletown, a school for handicapped children with emotional and behavioral disorders like autism. But the trend in social work these days is away from big facilities like this one into community-based programs. They call it mainstreaming.
We know you have a great mind and all.
12-year-old Chloe Shard is also autistic. She used to be in a program for disabled children, but according to her mom, institutional care was not for Chloe.
I used to call it the Play-Doh school. They would sit there pretty well most of the day rolling Play-Doh.
Now Chloe goes to a regular school, and she has an aide who spends 30 hours a week with her, half paid for by the province. Out in the community, Chloe has learned to communicate.
You're going to ask Sarah how school's doing. It works. In our experience, it works.
It's this kind of success that the province wants to repeat. So last month, without warning, they announced the closure of Thistletown, redirecting the $14 million budget to community programs. Parents of the 400 children who use the center organized protests.
Well, I can tell you, Thistletown is not going to close until there are other programs in place.
According to the minister, it's a question of where to spend a limited budget.
To not only provide the same quality of care for the same number of children that are being served at Thistletown, but we think for more children.
It's not a lot of money.
Now, parents with children at Thistletown are threatening to sue. Nothing short of a guarantee to keep the center open will do.
And I will not let a community-based agency, in particular, use my son as a guinea pig once again to see if the system will work.
While Sandra Bradley fears for the future of her son Nathan, for Chloe Shard, community care is working.
Chloe, what do you like about regular school?
Yeah. I have more friends.
Anton Koshani, CTV News, Toronto.
They marched against the closing of the center, which treats about 400 autistic and developmentally challenged children and adults. They are continuing their fight against the Ontario government. Last month, Queen's Park said the center will close in 8 months' time. For 15 years, Peggy Dow.
Sector, welfare reform, and 12,000 civil service jobs vanishing, mostly by attrition. Health and education are frozen, but otherwise untouchable.
The Ontario Liberal Balanced Budget Plan is realistic, practical, and most important, it is doable.
Remember 4 years ago when Bob Ray got into power and he said a lot of those nasty Liberals in that building there left the cupboards bare? Could that happen to McLeod? Nah. Anyway, right up here a little bit to the left is Bob Ray building his war chest. Let's go. And look at this. Bob Ray's even got supporters outside of his dinner. Well, maybe not. The Thistletown in the Ray government's side, outside, hoping the Premier would stop by and stop the closing of the handicap center.
And it's time that we started stopping all this cutting of public services, because we need public services.
Don't make cutbacks on our kids' butts.
And while the Liberals listened and dined, the NDPers were still drinking, waiting for Ray, who slipped in the back door. So what about the balanced budget brigade down the street, Bob?
She's cutting and slashing programs, cutting and slashing services for people in a way that's really going to hurt folks.
Ray says he's glad the other two have gone way to the right, leaving him the left and the whole middle. I've got to book my vacation. Can you give me some clues?
Well, I've said all along that I don't like campaigning in July and August, so you can figure it out from there.
All right. Party ratings? Liberals offered to feed the media. NDP Liquor Minister Marilyn Shirley offered to buy us a drink.
A group of protesters made their presence known at that Bob Ray fundraiser tonight. The group is made up of parents, friends, and staff of the Thistletown Regional Center for Developmentally Handicapped Children. The group has been fighting the government's plan to close the facility. Diane Spence-Vernon joins us now with that. Diane.
Ona, the friends and family of the children who use this facility say their strategy is simple. Keep up the pressure until the government changes its mind.
Can I give you some information on the programs being affected by the closure?
It's been 2 months since the closure of Thistletown was announced. In that time, the people who want to keep it open have gotten organized. They now call themselves FACT, an acronym for Families and Friends Against the Closing of Thistletown.
Keep our kids where the treatment works.
They have also won the support of one of Ontario's most powerful unions, OPSU. Most of the people who work at the center belong to that union. But union president Fred Upshaw says their support is not an attempt to hang on to their jobs.
We're not going to lose our jobs if they close Thistletown down. But our people are professionals. And they're talking up for what they know is going to be harmful for those patients.
Thistletown is here to stay. Ho, ho!
Patty Hewitt says this is just another battle in the war to find quality care for her son.
I was told at 6 years old, I'm sorry, in York Region, we can't put him anywhere. He doesn't fit. So the treatment is what is needed.
Hewitt and the other parents have aimed their collective anger at Minister of Social Services Tony Salipo. He was on hand tonight for the Premier's dinner.
There is a meeting. The Premier is having a meeting. I'm having a meeting with you.
Well, the program is still going to be closed, but what we want to do is, as I say, is to be sure that before the programs are closed and before any child is moved out, that there are, in fact, new programs in place that these children can go to.
So it seems the protests aren't having much effect on the government at this time. However, Minister Salipo will meet with the parents next Monday.
All right, thanks, Diane.
Thank you.
Protesters greeted guests at an NDP fundraiser tonight. Friends and family against the closing of Thistletown Regional Treatment Center made themselves heard outside the Colony Hotel. Premier Bob Rae didn't pass through the crowd to enter the hotel, but a likeness of Rae joined in the chants to stop cutbacks. Thistletown supporters say the center is a must for children with severe behavioral and developmental problems.
Thistletown is the cornerstone for children's services, and if Thistletown goes, any facility can go. It's the only facility for adolescent sex offenders in Ontario that provides a comprehensive treatment service, the only one in Ontario, and if that one goes, what are all the other services going to be able to do in terms of training, in terms of research?
4 Metro police officers are facing
Supporters of the doomed Thistletown Regional Centre rallied in downtown Toronto Thursday night. As many as 400 developmentally handicapped children will be relocated once the centre closes down in the summer. Almost half of them are from York Region.
There is nowhere that we could have our children that could help him. York Region Board of Education denied him access. They said his disabilities were too great. His social behavior patterns were incorrect, and he would not be tolerated in the system.
We're going to fight them every way we can, if not this way through the courts. We're going to beat them and win, and we have to for disabled children now and in the future in York Region, Toronto, and Peel.
Protesters were hoping to get a response from Premier Bob Rae, who was the guest of honor for an NDP fundraising dinner. Rae has so far refused to meet with parents, although Social Services Minister Tony Salipo plans to address their concerns during a meeting next week.
We're going to focus now on planning for the new services and make sure that those are in place, make sure that they're satisfactory to the parents, and make sure also that no changes take place to the existing programs at Thistletown until those new programs are in place.
Parents of Thistletown children have also hired a lawyer to fight the government in court if adequate services are not provided.
Ahead on your #1 news, Thistletown turmoil takes its toll. Casino settlement could be at hand. Premier Rae keeps on going and send in the robots. Nightbeat is...
Nightbeat News with Ken Shaw and Christine Bentley.
Good evening. Community Services Minister Tony Salipo confronted tonight.
Supporters of Thistletown are fighting to save their centre. CFTO's Carly Nation reports.
It's been an emotional subject for all concerned, and tonight's meeting got off to a frightening start when one of the parents opposed to the closing of the Thistletown Centre collapsed. Richard Bradley was taken to Etobicoke General Hospital suffering from severe chest pains. The families of the more than 400 developmentally handicapped children who use the center have been hounding Community Services Minister Tony Salipo since his announcement last January that the center will be closed.
So that we've said to people that no changes in the program here at Thistletown will take place at least until November, and that during that time we will make sure that there is adequate planning that takes place through 3 local planning bodies.
But the families say their children won't get the same service elsewhere.
And what's taking place here is the abandonment of behaviorally challenged individuals for some communal good.
The families say they're not giving up. They plan to sue the government under the Charter of Rights and Freedoms as a last-ditch effort to try to keep the facility going. Carleen Nation, CFTO News.
Ontario's
Hope tonight for parents of the disabled and emotionally disturbed fighting to save Thistletown. They were invited down to Queen's Park to plead their case before the Social Services Minister and the Premier. No promises tonight, but the parents say at least they were able to get their message across.
If he changes the government's course of action and does something that can keep the programs alive and allow for children with behavioral handicaps to continue to have a place to go, be assessed, helped, I'd be very happy.
I don't think it's a matter of changing one's mind. It's more a matter of trying to find a way to mediate this thing and to find a way through, and that's exactly what we're trying to do.
An announcement was made last January to shut the center down. The Premier says he'll let the parents know if he can help them in the next 3 or 4 days.
Don't hurt yourself.
Children with special needs was also the focus at Queen's Park tonight. Premier Ray met with a group of angry parents opposed to his government's plan to shut down the Thistletown Community Centre in Etobicoke. Thistletown currently serves about 400 children with severe emotional and behavioral problems. Tonight, Ray said that he is willing to consider other options, but the centre is still scheduled to close by July of next year. After the meeting, the response ranged from lukewarm to distraught.
So I can't say I'm very happy, but I can say that at least for the first time I've heard someone say that they're actually willing to listen to the concerns we have.
No, I think he's convinced me that I should still go home and have a good cry because I'm going to lose my son.
BC Premier Mike Harcourt.
Ray met tonight with the group that's trying to keep the Thistletown Regional Centre open. The group has been waging a public campaign ever since the closing was announced 9 weeks ago. Diane Spence-Vernon joins us now with the details. Diane.
It's not proper. Today's society, you shouldn't have to fight for the rights of your child.
This is who Sandra Bradley is fighting for, her autistic son, Nathan. He's just 6 years old, and already he's spent most of his life getting treatment at Thistletown Regional Centre. But the centre is scheduled to close next year as part of a government reorganization plan.
There are growing regions in York and Peel that need to be given good services, and we've got to look at a facility like Thistletown and see if we can't rearrange the way money is spent a little differently.
Tonight, the group tried to convince the Premier that spending the money differently would be bad for the more than 400 children who use the centre.
Mr. Ray has healthy children. He's extremely lucky. I don't. I have one of those children who's been cast out of society, and all I want is for my son to have a place to go to.
The group met with the Premier for about 40 minutes, but all they got was a promise that he would think about what they had said and get back to them.
I thought it was a lot of talk, and let's wait and see.
He did seem very interested in taking information and finding out where we were coming from.
If he decides against us, then it was a failure. But one thing I must tell you, we will never give up. It will be a very cold day, and you know where, before I give up. Because my brother's life's on the line here, and I'm never going to give up.
Oh no, the Premier has promised to meet with the parents again in about 3 to 4 days with possible alternatives to the care their family members are now receiving at Thistletown. All right, thanks, Diane. Ontario.
For families who are fighting to keep the Thistletown Regional Treatment Centre open. Here is CFTO's Carleen Nation.
That at least for the first time I've heard someone say that they're actually willing to listen to the concerns we have. So to that extent, I'm happy.
Protester David Cohen says he finally got Premier Bob Ray to sit down and listen to the concerns of the families. They pleaded with Ray to keep the Thistletown Centre open. It provides services to 400 behaviorally handicapped children and youth. Ray says he was there to listen.
Be looking at ways in which we can give people assurances and also respond in a very direct way to the issues that they've raised. People work very hard to present me with a brief. I intend to read the brief very carefully and respond to it.
The families have been hounding Ray for the past few months since his government announced plans to close the center. The families say their children won't get the same quality of care at other community centers. Ray says he'll have a final answer for them in 3 days. Carleen Nation, CFTO News.
PC leader Mike Harris.
Tonight for Thistletown supporters after a face-to-face meeting at Queen's Park. Social Services Minister Tony Salipo told parents tonight he's put the closure of the center on hold until after an independent review. But some say the move is meant to keep the parents quiet until after a provincial election.
The families and friends of Thistletown have rocked the government, and the government is trying to at least hold the families and friends of Thistletown at bay.
And I think that the issue of Thistletown is going to be have to be dealt with by whoever is in this position. So it's not a question of trying to avoid that. It's a question of trying to respond in a legitimate way to some very legitimate concerns that parents have raised.
Parents will meet next Tuesday to decide the next step. Another group of parents gathered tonight arguing that more children could be served if Thistletown is closed and the money spent on community-based programs.
CFTO TV, Channel 9 in Toronto, Cable 8. Night Beat News with Ken Shaw and Christine Bentley.
Good evening. The NDP has reversed its decision to close Thistletown.
The government wants more time to study the Centre for Special Needs Children, but as CFTO's Pat Foran reports, critics say it just wants to avoid a thorny election issue.
Parents with children that attend Thistletown met once again tonight with Social Services Minister Tony Salipo. The group has been dogging the minister since he announced plans to close the center that helps special needs children. After the meeting, parents emerged victorious. They were told the closure would be delayed by as long as 3 months so it can be reviewed by an independent consultant.
The families and friends of Thistletown have rocked the government.
Those in favor of the closure were shocked by the decision. The less vocal groups say Thistletown uses $5 million to look after only 77 children. They say the money could go further in community-based programs.
I'm sorely disappointed that the Premier felt he had to instruct his minister to behave in this way.
Our group believes that the services that are being delivered at Thistletown can be delivered in the community by community-based agencies.
The minister says an independent review will examine all options.
So it's not a question of trying to avoid that. It's a question of trying to respond in a legitimate way to some very legitimate concerns that parents have raised.
Salipo says he wants to make sure the government makes the right decision on Thistletown, but his critics charge the issue is too hot to handle, and the minister is buying time to avoid ugly confrontations on the election trail. Pat Foran, CFTO News. Toronto
Television.
Tonight, an inquest recommendations after a tragic murder-suicide. Center is a treatment center for emotionally and physically disabled children and was threatened with closure. Earlier tonight, the Provincial Minister of Community and Social Services met with a community group fighting to keep the center open, and Mike Wise was there, and he's standing by now with the details. Mike.
Oh, no, not all the details have been worked out yet, but tonight, the people who have been lobbying to save Thistletown are pleased.
I don't think there's any secret about it that the families and friends of Thistletown have rocked the government.
The government is stalling plans to close at the Regional Treatment Center and put the money into community services instead. Now the center will undergo an independent review, although no one has been named.
No, the parents will be involved. The parents will be involved, as will other people that have an interest in this issue.
Workers who might benefit from Thistletown's closing are upset.
And we think this decision is unfair, prolonging the delay and the uncertainty for the parents while another review is done on.
But it's the parents who have made Thistletown an issue, a potential election issue. A review could take all summer, keeping the protesters off the campaign trail.
If we really are getting
something that we can believe in and believe it's an honest attempt to listen to our concerns, then they won't have the Thistletown thorn. But on the other...
Oh, no, the next step is to name the person who will conduct the independent review and then create an advisory panel to work with that person. And the Thistletown parents plan to meet to discuss the government's latest offer next week.
All right, thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Still, if Thistletown lives on, the fact remains many healthcare facilities and services face cuts. The union representing hospital workers says it plans to make healthcare an election issue.
Parents defending Thistletown are crying foul tonight. Videographer Dan Petkovsik tells us while the government has put the closure of the center on hold, parents question the fairness of the independent review and the minister responsible.
In a letter sent to Premier Bob Rae by their lawyers, parents say any hope they may have had that a review of the center's future would be impartial have been shattered. They say Tony Salipo, the minister responsible, is double dealing, and he has every intention of closing the center, regardless of what the review says.
In an article in the local paper, the Mississauga News, the quote here we have is, "In a private meeting with Peel representatives, Salipo said the review wouldn't change his decision to close Thistletown, just delay it." Doesn't sound like a full and honest review, which is what we've asked for.
And at tonight's meeting, they were also suggesting some fundamental changes to the way the review will be done.
What we have is one person making a very important decision. It should be made by a large group of interested people.
This is to Bob Rae. The review body must consist of more than one person. A task force of a number of persons, including family representation, is required.
You have to have a group of people so that a representative of the families, and I don't know what representation it should be, but it certainly should not be nothing.
FACT is demanding an immediate investigation by the Premier's office into the allegations made about the minister's intentions. At the moment, neither the Premier or the ministry has made any comment about either the letter or the recommendations on the review. I'm Dan Petkovsik at Thistletown for City Pulse Tonight.
Tonight on the news at 6, Truck Blitz Day 2 and another case of runaway tires. A waitress vindicated an abusive customer was an occupational hazard. And prize cats, you bet.
News at 6 with Jane Gilbert, Susan Hay with the weather, and Jim Taddy with sports.
Good evening. The Rae government today backed away from its controversial decision to shut down Toronto's Thistletown Regional Centre for Developmentally Disabled Children. Social Services Minister Tony Salipo now says an independent consultant will review the plan. As Global's Queen's Park correspondent Marina Colby reports, some families are happy with today's move, others are not.
6-year-old Nathan Bradley is autistic. He's one of about 400 children who is helped by the Thistletown Centre for Mentally and Emotionally Disabled Children. His parents are pleased that the government will review plans to close the centre.
By the grace of God, so many other people have healthy children. All I want is my son to have a chance in life, and Thistletown is the only place to this point who has given my son that chance. And to take Thistletown away means you're going to take my kid.
Thistletown supporters have been protesting since January when Social Services Minister Tony Salipo decided to close the centre and redirect the money to community agencies. Salipo insists that his decision to review the closing has nothing to do with the upcoming election.
We have to rebuild a sense of trust with the parents, particularly, and with others who haven't understood the decision.
However, some parents and community agencies who support closing Thistletown are discouraged by Salipo's flip-flop. They believe Thistletown's almost $15 million annual budget could serve more children if the money was redirected to community services that are more cost-efficient.
I'm very concerned that the whole issue is going to get lost in an election campaign and that it will be much longer than 3 months.
The Bradleys are also skeptical about the motive for the review. They worry the children are being used to score political points. Marina Colby, Global News, Queen's Park.
And there was more talk about the upcoming...
Tonight, a fresh jab from an old thorn in Premier Ray's side, the Thistletown Centre. The Centre for Developmentally Challenged Children has had a rough ride lately. First, the Ministry of Community and Social Services recommended its closure. Then it got a reprieve in the form of a review period, but that hasn't pleased everyone.
We are going to ask these people here whether they want to go on with the review as it is presently made up, or whether they want us as an executive committee to go back to, be it Bob Ray or the reviewer himself, and say, sorry, we can't be part of this process unless we get some changes.
They held that vote just moments ago, and the decision was unanimous. Clients of the center do want more involvement in the review. Now they just have to convince the government to let them have it.
Has come back to haunt Bob Ray. It involves the Thistletown Community Center for Developmentally Challenged Children. The Ray government originally ordered it closed, but after strong protests from clients, the decision was reversed and a review ordered. Last night, the clients demanded a say in that process.
We are going to ask these people here whether they want to go on with the review as it is presently made up, or whether they want us as an executive committee to go back to, be it Bob Ray or the reviewer himself, and say, sorry, we can't be part of this process unless we get some changes.
Thistletown clients say they have no idea how long the review is going to take.
Debates tonight, Thistletown Regional Center. Outside a high school, staff of Thistletown Center and concerned parents were operating an information picket. Inside, candidates were facing questions from about 125 people wanting more information about Thistletown's status. The center offers help to severely disabled children. Its future is currently under review by Queen's Park.
Metropolitan that won't go away for Bob Ray, the closing of Thistletown. Tonight, members of FACT were meeting and advocating for more say in the review process the NDP government put in place last month. Families and friends against the closing of Thistletown feel the process is not adequate to properly review the center that provides services to 400 behaviorally handicapped children. The review process was put in place after the protesting families hounded Ray for months after plans to close the center were announced.
With Christine Bentley and Ken Shaw.
Good evening. Heated arguments tonight during a debate with the three provincial leaders.
They participated in a Toronto Star debate on the GTA, and CFTO's Carleen Nation was there.
Right now, there are too many politicians doing too much of the same thing.
Liberal leader Lynn McLeod kicked off the debate with her plans for the Greater Toronto area.
I would get rid of direct election to Metro, and with one stroke, get rid of 28 politicians, their offices, and budgets.
But Premier Bob Ray shot it down.
Mrs. McLeod has suggested again tonight an entire list of quick fixes, stolen ideas, and wishful thinking.
Conservative leader Mike Harris says the Liberals are responsible for the loss of jobs and businesses in the GTA.
It was just that attitude that led Mrs. McLeod and her Peterson colleagues to bring in new development charges and new land transfer taxes that significantly stifled development in the GTA.
The debate was often interrupted by hecklers who wanted attention focused on their issues. There was general agreement on some issues, like property tax reform. They agreed that there's no easy solution to restructuring the tax system to prevent businesses from leaving the core of the city. The debate will only get hotter as the election draws near. The only thing everyone is waiting for is the Premier to announce a date. Carleen Nation, CFTO News.
Of Dovercourt riding in West Toronto got a chance to sound off at their local candidates tonight in an all-candidates meeting. Incumbent Tony Salipo is trying to hang on to the riding, which has been in NDP hands for most of the last 20 years, but he faces a tough fight. Diane Spence-Vernon takes a look at the race.
On the streets of Dovercourt riding, there's only one issue that counts this election: jobs. This riding is typical old Toronto. Many of the neighborhoods are working class with a lot of small businesses. There's a huge immigrant population here, primarily Italian, Portuguese, and Jamaican. Each of the main parties has held this riding at one time or another. For the last 4 years, it's belonged to Minister of Community and Social Services, Tony Silipo.
When Silipo took this riding back in 1990, he beat Liberal Tony Lupicello by more than 4,000 votes. This time around, Silipo has a handicap, a community disillusioned with the NDP government.
So you know, I worked for you last election, and I remember speaking to you in the park, and a couple of years ago, I think it was, and warning you about what I saw as a lurch to the right that the NDP was taking.
Getting the most support at an all-candidates meeting tonight was independent Labour candidate Imani Oakley. A healthcare worker at Wellesley Hospital, she claims to represent all the things the NDP used to stand for. Shelley Lipsey of the Green Party garnered applause for his call for participatory democracy. But resident Marlene Lindsay made it clear that she felt a vote for a fringe party was a wasted vote.
So the reality of the political situation in Ontario does not favor independent candidates.
Tory candidate Malcolm Mansfield owns a driving school. He stuck to the script of the Common Sense Revolution, but was booed whenever he tried to answer a question. Maria De Silva Scultetti, a lawyer and community activist, got almost the same response for the Liberal plan. For his part, Tony Silipo spent most of the evening defending his government's record. Diane Spence-Vernon, CBC News, Toronto.
Cutbacks stir hot emotions at the Thistletown Community Center tonight. The long-awaited review of the facility for disabled kids came out just hours ago, and parents are devastated at what they heard.
I'm suggesting, too, that Thistletown remain open for 18 months, and during that period of time, that children who are not in those two programs interface in safety, that arrangements would be made for those children to be transferred to programs in the community.
While some parents tried to shut down the shutdown, outside the protest was just as blunt. OPSU has already damned the review. Tonight it's up to the Tories to make the final call. No injuries from that last story, nor in this one, even though we are taking you.
Nightbeat News with Christine Bentley and Ken Shaw.
Good evening. Angry parents tonight burn the report which recommends the closure of Thistletown.
And CFTO's Ali Velshi was there.
Yes, that's correct.
And our family's not one of the most important things.
And if
because you're going to destroy my family, okay? You're going to destroy my family. I'm going to lose my son.
It was supposed to be a meeting to discuss findings of an independent review with the parents of Thistletown children. It became a shouting session in a matter of minutes.
What you did? What you did? The kids are still there. What you did? Look at the report. Look at the garbage you did for 1 year.
Review author Robert Couchman called the meeting to explain to parents why he was recommending the closure of the facility, which caters to children and adolescents with special needs. But the parents were in no mood to listen. Couchman says the center should be closed and money for its program should be made available to community agencies doing similar work. But Couchman admits if there isn't enough money to run Thistletown, there won't be enough to duplicate the services it offers. Sandy Bradley's 6-year-old son Nathan is severely autistic. Nathan went through 12 social service agencies before Thistletown accepted him. Now Sandy says she's going to have to start the battle again to find a place for Nathan.
I don't care if you have mapped out my son's future. You didn't talk to me about it.
Sandy, I came here tonight to talk with the audience.
The review was commissioned by the previous NDP government. The parents are hoping that their protest tonight will convince the Tory government not to implement the recommendations in the review. They say their first concern is for what will happen to the children if Thistletown is closed. Ali Velshi, CFTO News.
Meanwhile, ringing the death knell on Thistletown, enraged parents reach the boiling point. Good evening, I'm Mona Fletcher. Plenty of fighting words and desperate pleas from an angry group of parents in Etobicoke tonight. They're trying to save a children's mental health facility. In January, the former NDP government announced plans to close down the Thistletown Centre. Some vocal demonstrations got the government to re-examine that decision. But tonight, they got the same bad news again. Michael Weiss joins us now with more. Michael.
Thanks, Ona. The bad news is this report. It was prepared for the Ministry of Community and Social Services, and it recommends that the Thistletown Centre be closed. Now, it's a large treatment centre in northern Etobicoke, and that'll affect about 400 children and their families. Tonight, the author of the report, Robert Couchman, met with some of those families, and you could say tensions flared.
Ask a question. I'd be happy to hear the question. I'd be happy to answer the question.
There wasn't much Robert Couchman could have done to satisfy this angry group of parents.
You and everybody talk like that. That's right. Because you don't feel nothing. That's right. That's it. You don't know the pain. Yeah,
The report praised the services at Thistletown, but criticized how it was being run. Inefficient management meant it would have to be overhauled, and that would, in effect, kill the center.
We at the beginning said it ain't broke.
It is broke, Sandy.
You're saying financially it's broke. That's not supposed to rest on the shoulders of our children, of our families. Why should we pay the price for the government's royal fuck-ups all along? It's not our fault. Why should our children have to suffer? Why should we have to suffer, Mr. Couchman? It's not fair.
For the parents here, Thistletown was a center of excellence and a center of last resort, with experts that could help children who couldn't be helped by other community programs.
After as hard a struggle I've had to come to get here, where does my son go after
Where do
that?
they go?
Jane Fowler's 10-year-old son has severe attention deficit disorder and depression. He lives in a group home. She sees him twice a month and says Thistletown helps to save children like hers.
If they don't get the guidance and the support they need, you're going to pick up the tab later on down the road. Now's the time to get them when they're very young and can be treated. Why wait until it's too late?
Couchman's report recommends that many of Thistletown's staff be moved to other underserved community centers in York and Peel region, but some parents say the expertise and support they get at Thistletown can't be found elsewhere.
I want my life, and you know what? It exists in this building. And you want to take it away, and if you want to take it away, you go over to that house, you get my son, and you take him home with you. And you see what it's like to live like this.
And Ona, the groups are vowing to continue their fight to keep Thistletown open tonight. They say they're really no further ahead now than they were back in January when the plans to close it were first announced. They say now they just have to convince the new regime, the new Minister of Community and Social Services, David Tabucci, to keep the center open.
And what is the minister's response?
Well, there's been no response from the minister's office tonight. An aide is saying that he still has to read the report, but there is some talk that he might open any sort of decision-making process open it to some sort of feedback and input from the parents.
All right, Michael, thank you.
Thank you.
There is
I hear you, but I got men leaving